Hello, everyone. So today, actually, one of the things that I'd like to add to the introduction, which is great to be introduced in the room, by the way. I never did before. Next time, I should say I'm a lord or something similar. So one thing that I'd like to add is that in Digital Detox, which is a product agency, we do mainly web development in Brixton, down London, we believe and we care about three things mainly. People, planet, and technology. We call them our pillars. These are the things that I care about. People, planet, and technology. Should probably mention my son, in fact. Now, this talk is about all of those three things. We're going to see how we can use technology to deliver something that is good for planet and ultimately also for people. Now, some time ago, I started wondering about my job and how does that have an impact on the planet. So I started Googling, and I found out that according to the website carbon.com, an average website makes a 1.76 grams of CO2 per page visit, which means that if that website makes 100,000 visits in a month, it will add up to 2,112 kilograms of CO2 emissions per year. 2,112 kilograms of CO2. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first heard about this, I was like, what does it mean? So I Googled more, and I found out that if you compare it to other business, a single website per year, I flew from Naples yesterday, so there will be 4 return flights from Naples. Or, if you go by car, is 6,700 kilometers. Now, that makes the internet, if it was a country, the 7th largest polluter in the world. So what I got from it is that the work I do, as well as the work that my team does, has an impact, or can have a good impact on the planet. And just like Ben Parker would say, I immediately felt responsible to use that power to make something good. Now, the next question is obviously, how do I measure the impact? Where is the website emitting that CO2? So if you go on website carbon.com, you put your website on it, and it'll tell you how horrible of a person you are by creating something that's so destroy the planet. And if you go and dig down, you'll see that their criteria is under data transfer over the wire, energy intensity of web data, energy source used by the data center, carbon intensity of electricity, and website traffic. In other words, your website is in a data center that burns energy. That's the first emission there. The next thing is the transmission networks, because the data has to travel from the data center to the end user. And obviously, the end user device also burns energy right there. So now that we know where the impact is, let's try and fix that website, or in fact, let's try to reduce its impact. Now, the first thing, even though it might not seem relevant, is SEO. Because if you think about it, the less the user will look for you on the web, the less useless data they will consume. In a similar way, we have UX and UI. UX is kind of the same thing. The better UX, the less time the user will spend consuming useless pages, useless data. Imagine of FAQ section, which is not easy to create in terms of user experience, because you want to give the right answer immediately with the less number of filters or the less number of clicks. UI obviously makes a big impact. The one thing that I would like to share with you today is something I discovered recently, is that the colors have an impact. That is because if you think about it, a brighter color will consume more energy than a darker color. That's why a dark theme is a good option for your website. The other thing is obviously images. We're going to have a little section about images, they deserve it. And then animations, a complex animation will require maybe JavaScript and long CSS files. The file weight has to go to the transmission networks, of course. Now, about images, you want to ask yourself every time you add an image to your design, does that actually add a value to the final user? Does it communicate useful information? Can I maybe use vector graphics or CSS to achieve the same result? And if you think of things like carousels, you might not want to display or you want to lazy load all the images that are coming in a carousel or anything that is not visible to the user immediately. Now, similar for fonts, you want to try and reduce the amount of custom fonts as much as possible. When you do, try to avoid using all those variations like extra italic or extra thin, bold, super bold thing. So that, obviously, that's also less data over the transmission networks. We spoke about efficient code a lot. You don't want to hate your code base. You want to scale your code base. But that actually has an impact on the sustainability as well. Why? Because if you think about a query that is not efficient, it will transmit lots of useless data through the wire. Imagine if you're just getting a list of articles and you don't use the pagination. You would just load thousands of articles on your body for no reason, because the user might not get to that page. Instead, having a pagination query is more efficient, and does also have a less impact. You got it. Maintainable and extensible code is not just a good practice. It also means you reduce the amount of duplication of code, and that means that also less JavaScript means less file weight that goes over, again, the transmission network. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with SSR, server-side rendering, and static build. But server-side rendering was mainly there for SPA, so a website done with React, Angular, and Vue.js to be crawled by Google. So what happens is that when the user or the Google bot requests the page, the server will build that page and deliver to the user. Now, that happens every time the user fetches it. Whereas if you use a technology like static build, what will happen instead is that when the data changes, then the server will build it and then get those static files and put it in a bucket. That means that the website will build only when the data changes. And if you use something like Gatsby.js, which is a framework I love and recommend, it would actually be able to use incremental build pages, which will only build the pages that effectively changed. So that reduced the impact to the bare minimum. Progressive web apps, another thing I'm a fan of, in particular, service workers, combined with a static page. Service workers will create a caching mechanism that will save your static files on the user device in a cache, and then on every other visit, it will serve the website from the cache first, while the service worker is checking for new requests. So that potentially means zero impact over the transmission network right there. Once you got this beautiful statically built PWA, you want to put it on a green hosting. What that means, you have to check for the PUE, which is Power User Efficiency Rating. And then the other thing that you want to consider is a content delivery network architecture. That allows you to put those buckets as near as possible to the final user, because the less the data travels, the less impact it has. Now, if you look at this, you can see two things. The first thing is that it's a team effort. It's DevOps, SEO, design, UX, and developer all working together towards the impact. The other thing is that these are just best practices. In fact, what this means is that a website that has less impact on the planet is, after all, a very performant with a very good UX website, which translates into make it easier for you to sell it to your stakeholders. Either way, if you want to sell sustainability, then you can say this is nothing else than a performant website. If you want to sell a performant website, you can say this is sustainable. It's a good package of nice things that the stakeholders will love, and the final user will love, and the planet as well. Now, ideally, you go back on that website, and you feel a bit less of a horrible person. You got 22 seconds to take a picture of this. This is a few resources that I went online. So this is the sources where I got this data, plus a couple of things that we created from Digital Detox. The last one is the Green Report. 7 seconds. Go and look at it. I'm gonna see you at the office hours, and thank you very much for having me.